كلية الفقه الحنفي تقدم
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So today, in today's lesson, we're going to discuss a few things, inshallah. Firstly, I just want to clarify to you something from yesterday's session. The difference between the mashhur and the khabr al-wahid according to the Hanafis. So the mashhur according to the Hanafis was where it started off from the time of the Prophet ﷺ as being ahad, so singular reports. And then after that, it spread so much very soon after that, to such a degree that it's inconceivable for those people to have agreed to take something wrong like that, and for them to have agreed that, you know, they're going to accept a falsehood and collude like that. That's mashhur, right? Whereas the khabr al-wahid was where it doesn't reach that level. So it's too few people in each generation, and then it was never, you know, taken up like that. So that is what would be the khabr al-wahid essentially. So hopefully that provides an a clarification. Now, what else I want to mention here is that what we're going to do today now is we're going to take the sunnah mutawatira, right? That's the first category, and how the Hanafis break that up interestingly into 4 categories. So let me just introduce them to you first now, so you, briefly. The first one is tawatur al-isnad al-lafzi. That essentially is the one that you've usually heard about, which is that something the Prophet ﷺ said or did was transmitted in the same wording by multiple people from the Prophet ﷺ, and then onwards from each generation there's so many people that they can't collude on the wrong, okay, on falsehood. So that is like the optimal, that the wording is exactly the same or very, very similar, and it's so many in each generation that, you know, it just passes down like that. The second one is called tawatur al-qadr al-mushtarak, where the wording is not the same. Many people have transmitted the same kind of idea, paraphrased it in different words, so each independent report in terms of the unique wording in that will not have more than, you know, a few similar narrations like that. However, if you look at the whole thing, the meaning that is coming from there, the message from there is exactly the same generation after generation, right? But just the wording, the actual wording of it is different. It's articulated in different ways, same meaning though. The third and the fourth one, I'm just going to quickly mention them and then explain them later, is at-tawatur al-tabaqi or at-tawaruth al-madrasi, and the last one is at-tawatur al-amali. Right? Now there's a subtle difference between them, which I'll explain later, but the third one is where one level of scholarship, one whole generation of scholars have taken from another generation up and upwards, but without the isnad aspect of it, without the chain from so-and-so, from so-and-so. It's more of a generation taking an action from another one, but not purely just in action, but focused on that particular group of people, or a large group of people obviously. And the last one is going to be purely based on action, that from the time of the Prophet ﷺ something was taken, something was practiced, you can say, not taken but practiced, right? This is called the tawatur al-amali, the practical continuous practice, right? Continuous practice. So they all did something in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, next generation carried on doing that, third generation carried on doing that, and so on, right? So that's the 2 different ones. Inshallah we'll be dealing with this today. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So we gave you the outline of the 4 different types of tawatur, right, according to the Hanafis. So I'm going to look at that in a bit more detail right now and tell you the value of each one of them and what kind of legislation can we establish through them. I think that's what's very important. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for assistance to understand. It's a very unique discussion, right? And while the information of this has been scattered throughout the Hanafi school from the early scholars and so on, I think it was Imam Anwar Shah Kashmiri, right, as mentioned by Dr. Salah Abul Hajj as well, that he's one of the first to put this together in this way, even though it was scattered and found in different places. But he's the one, he says, التواتر عندي على 4 أقسام. So Kashmiri rahimahullah says that the tawatur is of 4 categories, and that's the 4 that I've explained to you, right? So there was a slight the main difference between the first one is quite easy to understand. I think let's just quickly go through that, and to give a better understanding. Now that is where the wording is exactly the same and so widely reported, and then generation after generation, that is like the ultimate one. And if mutawatir is mentioned in an unqualified way, that is the one that is going to be understood. The muhaddithin agree with that one. That is what they take as well, right? It has, there's different definitions of that. I'll just give you one. He says, خبر جماعة يفيد بنفسه العلم بصدقه. The information provided by such a large group of people, which just by itself, without any other factors, just by the fact that so many people have said something, right, shows that it has to be true. And so many people have said the exact same thing, shows that it is true. That is what it usually refers to. Now, this is where the wording is exactly the same, for example, or very, very close together. Now, examples of that is the way the Quran has been transmitted, the number of rak'ats of prayer. For example, that there's 4 rak'ats in Dhuhr, and 4 rak'ats for Asr, and Maghrib there's 3 rak'ats. That has pretty much been transmitted like that all the way down. The second one, another example of that is how much zakat to give, right, for each animal, or for money, and for different types of commodities. Another one is what are the different compensations, or you can say payments that you have to give, or ransoms that you have to give for different types of injuries that people might have. What are the number of number of tawafs, circumambulations around the Kaaba? That pretty much has been transmitted in that way. The fact that wukuf of Arafah, the standing in Arafah, is that something anybody would doubt? So all of these things are very well established in that sense. And the hukm of this, meaning anything that is established by this level of tawatur, both according to the usulis and the hadith scholars, is that it provides definitive knowledge, conviction, without any doubt. It's the same as you having seen it yourself and you having heard it yourself. And that is why that is why anybody who rejects this could be called a kafir, because it's the highest level of proof that you have. Okay, let's move on to the next one. The next one was the message was same, even though the wording was different. So that's obviously going to be very similar to the first one, but it's just that the wording is different here. Okay, so each individual narration, each unique wording could be ahad, could be singular narrations, but when you put them all together, mashallah, they're saying the same thing. They're saying very, very same thing. Now, the way to understand that is today, for example, a particular leader of the world, right? A particular leader of the world, an aspect about him, right? A characteristic of his, or their behavior. You have so many. Now, we may have never met this particular president or prime minister or leader or king or sultan or whatever it is. However, there's so many people, news agencies and others, who are transmitting the same thing, maybe through pictures and words and so on. And they're using different wording, they're using different pictures, but you get this very particular aspect that, oh, he is like that, or he spends a lot of money, or he supports a certain place, or a certain group, or whatever the case is. The example given in the classical text usually is, there's a person called Hatim at-Ta'i, Hatim, and he was known to be very, very, very generous. And this came through widespread reports from different people. Now, for that to have happened, he must have been very, very generous to multiple people, so that those multiple people would have transmitted that down, and anybody hearing that coming from, oh, he said that as well, and he said the same thing, and he described it in the same way, like, he must be like that. He must be like that, right? So the wording doesn't have to be the same, but you get it's so many people that there can't be any doubt about it. So Imam Kashmiri says, now it depends on how what kind of knowledge does this provide, right? What kind of knowledge does this provide? Does it provide definitive knowledge, or is there going to be some kind of doubt in here? If it's definitive knowledge, then anybody who rejects that, we can call them a kafir, basically a disbeliever. So Imam Kashmiri clarifies this. He says that if it provides such immediate knowledge, intuitive knowledge, axiomatic knowledge, then anybody rejecting that is going to be a kafir. This is if it's something related to the Sharia, right? So it's explaining one of the orthodox substratum of beliefs, what in Arabic they refer to as al-ma'lumu min ad-din bid-durura, that which is by necessity known as being part of the faith. For example, that we Muslims pray 5 times a day, right? Muslim women have to cover, right? You have to go for Hajj. These ideas, these aspects are so axiomatic, so intuitive, that anybody who rejects any of that would be a kafir. However, if it is providing something else which needs a bit of recourse to a bit of a syllogism or looking into it deeply, and it's not like so clearly discernible straight away, then in that case he's saying that in that case you can't call them a kafir, because that's going to require a bit more effort to understand. Now, some of the examples of this, right, is masah, which means wiping over the khuf, the leather sock, or anything that's comparable to that, is something that is related from about 80 Sahaba, 80 companions. However, the wording may not be the same in each person, so it's not the actual same verbatim narration that's been transmitted, but they're all narrated in different ways. So the common message is, from about 80 of them, that the Prophet ﷺ wiped over his leather socks. So that means that this has to be something established. It can't have been made up. So many people have done it. So that's a mutawatir of this category. Another one would be men not being allowed to wear golden rings. That's transmitted from so many people. So Imam Tahawi, for example, says, رُوِيَ فِي النَّهِي مِنْ خَاتِمِ الذَّهَبِ آثَارٌ مُتَوَاتِرَةٌ. Regarding the prohibition of wearing gold rings, for men, there are mutawatir, widespread reports about that. جاءت مجيئا صحيحا, and they all have come in a very authenticated ways and reliable way as well. So there's numerous examples. I don't want to get into too many examples right now, but those would be that would be that category. Now the third category, which might have been slightly vague when I explained it earlier, is the difference between the third and fourth category. Just to make it life easy for you, is the third category is something which has then been contiguously practiced upon by a set group of people that could be a school of thought, like the Malikis. Right? Now Malikis are a huge group of people. Hanafis are a huge group of people, for example. They took something on, right? We're not talking about isnad here, the actual chain of transmission in terms of person to person. It's a group to group, right? They took it on, and then they have transmitted down, and each generation of Hanafis or Malikis, for example, did that thing. So the Malikis did that after seeing the people of Medina Munawwara do that thing. That is what this one refers to. That's why they call it a tawaruth al-madrasi as well, a school-based succession. The last one is a general one. It's not restricted to a school. It's basically people and scholars and others across the board, different places. It's not restricted to a school or a school of thought, right? So that's really the main difference between those two. So if I go into the third one, this is, for example, the Quran, right? The qira'at of the Quran, etc. That specifically is transmitted in this way, right? So east or west, this is how people have studied, this is how people have taught it, this is how people have memorized it, this is how people have essentially taken it from generation to generation to generation, and this is what you would call so that's essentially one example of that. And the way, you see, this might still be a bit vague for some people, but what it is that the Sahaba, they expanded, they shifted from Medina Munawwara. So you had like a group of people ended up in Kufa, a group of people ended in Makkah Mukarramah, a group of people ended up in Basra. Kufa had, mashallah, a huge amount of people. Some say even more than Medina Munawwara had retained in terms of Sahaba, right, and Tabi'een. That's how many Sahaba and Tabi'een were in Kufa, and there was a huge amount of work that took place there. So the people, Umar radiallahu anh, his fiqh is transmitted in Kufa. Abdullah ibn Masud radiallahu anh, Abdullah ibn Masud radiallahu anhu's fiqh is transmitted widespread in Kufa. He brought all of the knowledge. He was a great scholar, great jurist, and great scholar of the Quran, and he taught multiple people. I mean, there's a whole history about this which I'm not going to go into right now, but you can read about it if you want in a number of books, including Masar al-Usul of Sheikh Salah Abul Hajj, if you want to, right? So that was, so Umar radiallahu anhu sent Ammar ibn Yasir radiallahu anhu as an Amir. He sent Ibn Masud radiallahu anhu as the judge, right? So that transmission, that teaching, that tradition was passed down. Ali radiallahu anhu also made it his home for a few years, right? So they have that as well, okay? Subhanallah. So some say that there was more jurisprudence going on there in Kufa than there was in Medina Munawwara, okay? At least that is definitely claimed by a lot of people. So what happens then is that this particular area becomes unique with certain practices that have been derived all the way up from the Prophet ﷺ. In Medina Munawwara there might be slightly different ones, but for each of them that is tawatur for them, because they've taken it generation from generations right up to the top. A very, very interesting a very, very interesting phenomenon, to be honest. So the Malikis refer to this as Ijma'u Ahl al-Madina, and they would give precedence to that over Khabr al-Wahid and lone reports, right? Because for them it's very, very strong that how could all of these people from the Sahaba's time, could have got it so wrong. That's the way they take it, and that's why Rabi'atul Ra'i, who is the Shaykh of Imam Malik rahimahumullah, he says Alfun an alfin khayrun min wahidin an wahidin. Beautiful. He says 1,000 people from another 1,000 people is a lot better, right? More valuable than one person from one person. So if you've got a lone report of one person from one person, how could that compare with 1,000 people from 1,000 people that are all reliable, right? Now, similar is taken by the Hanafis for the from Kufa, right? So, in many masail, in many rulings, they go with the school of Kufa. So this is what Ibrahim al-Nakha'i, Alqama, and all the others who are all the direct the descendants, you can say, descendants in terms of knowledge, right? And students and grand students of Abdullah ibn Masud and others, they hold on to that very, very strongly. They think that that's very, very important for them. And the Hanafi madhab is based on the school of Kufa. So this is why Imam Quduri says, in fact, Imam Quduri says that he compares it with the school of Medina Munawwara, right? So he says that their statement that the Ahlul Medina do this and transmit this, he says that's not strong enough for us, because the Ahlul Kufa, the people of Kufa, they also, meaning we don't have to take that, because we're going to take from what the people of Kufa did and transmitted. That is strong for us. And he says that the reason why we're going to take the traditions of Kufa and the transmissions from Kufa more than even Medina Munawwara, for example, right, is that those who had moved to Medina Munawwara, those that moved to Kufa, of the Imams of fiqh and others, from the early generation, were a lot more than who had remained in Medina Munawwara, right? Now that's quite amazing. That's quite an amazing idea. So how do we take this school-based succession? What's the hukm of it? How definitive is it, right? We've already decided that for the first and second one. How definitive are these? So Imam Kashmiri says that in this one, you actually, because it's school-based and because there are other traditions, so for example, if the Hanafis establishing something, it can't be to the level of definitiveness because obviously the Malikis are doing something else. Now, you can't say that if somebody doesn't take this, then they're going to be kafir, because it doesn't work that way, right? There are multiple traditions in that regard. They all have an origin, right? A reliable origin. So, that's what he says. However, we can say that for one category of this category, we could say that. However, there's another category which I said earlier. The example I gave was the Quran, for example, how it's been spread, and that it comes under this category that everybody took it, because there's no isnad for the Quran that I took it from so and so and I took it from so and so. It's what they had already taken, right? The Qur'an, the Huffaz that they taken. So obviously that one, if anybody rejects that particular type of this category, they're going to be kafir. But the other one, where it's madhab based as such and not related to the Quran, right, which relates more to a certain practice of the Prophet ﷺ, another statement of the Prophet, not the Quran, then there you can't call them kafir, as I said earlier, right? Because those things are not part of those specific unique points that the Hanafis have or the Malikis have, are not orthodox substratum of beliefs that if somebody rejects them, they're going to be kafir. Right? We might call them, something else of a lower level, but they can't be kafir. So this is trying to speak about it from that highest level. Some of the examples of this. There's a hadith which says, "Asfiru bil fajr, فإنه أعظم للأجر." Brighten your fajr, which means that pray it after it gets bright. Don't pray it in the earliest time, as soon as the true dawn comes in, but rather wait until it's closer to sunrise, like in half an hour before sunrise, where the rays of the sun are peeking out, even though the sun has not arisen yet, because that would be end of Fajr time if it rises. So that is a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which has been accepted by the school of Imam Abu Hanifa and others. In fact, Imam Suyuti, who's not a Hanafi, and Imam Munawi, who are not Hanafis, they've even stated that this is mutawatir in that regard, and that's why we go with that. We don't go with the idea that you have to pray. Usually Salat should be prayed as early as possible, but not in Fajr for sure, right? For that, it's better to pray later. Another example is what the Hanafis take again through this contiguous narration, is the hadiths regarding the iqamah being also 2-2. So the Hanafi iqamah is also dual. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Double again for most of them except la ilaha illallah, right? Whereas the Shafi'is in iqamah, they do it singular. Except for the takbir, they do Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, Hayya ala salah, Hayya al falah. They do one each in that. Now we're saying that no, we have tawatur here. According to Imam Tahawi, for example, he mentions that the iqamah being the exact same as adhan, we've got this, right? We've got this understanding through our tawatur, because that is how it's been established, and that is how it was, so that's what we're going to take. So we take it based on that tawatur. But again, because the Shafis have taken it differently, we're not going to call each other kafir in this regard, right? Likewise, there's a number of others. There's a hadith about if it's too hot in dhuhr time, delay your dhuhr, right, to when it's a bit cooler. Not to miss your dhuhr, to still pray within dhuhr time, right, before asr time comes in, but just don't pray it at peak noon, right? For example, when the sun just moves from its axis, don't do that. Wait half an hour or so, or whatever it is. So there's a different hadith regarding that as well. Right, now let's move on to the last one, which I said was more widespread. It wasn't restricted to an area or a madhab or something like that. And that is where, again, so many people have transmitted an action in a way that again they can't have they can't be lying. Now you'll better understand, I think, through a hadith and how they separate. Through an example. The example here is miswak, or the siwak, right, which means to brush your teeth, to brush your teeth with the toothstick. This is not a madhab-based thing. There's so many narrations about this, and people have taken this as an action by even witnessing, their forebearers, the people before them doing this, right? So it's just so widespread, subhanallah, that nobody can doubt this, right? That's also a form of tawatur. Imam Kasari, the way he explains this, he says that this is a succession found through an action clearly practiced generation after generation, without any kind of condemnation or prohibition or rejection of it, right? I've already explained to you the difference between this one and the previous one is that this one is something that has been practiced since the time of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum and Tabi'een and others, right? Through various different schools, so it's not restricted to a group, whereas the third one was restricted to a particular group, certain qurra of a particular area, or the qurra means Quran reciters, right, or the jurists of a particular area. And the difference between this one and the second one above, where it had the common message in all of the narrations, right, and this particular one is that this one, this successive practice, right, is something which was applied by the Sahaba and the Tabi'een from what they had seen of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as opposed to the second category, right, where it's just the transmission of a message, of an idea. It wasn't necessarily done in practice. That one is, the first two are more related to the hadith wording itself. So the first one was where the wording is exactly the same or near about. The second one was where the wording is different but the common meaning is the same. The last two, right, are more related to the practice of it being successive, right? So the practice is successive. So this last category we're talking about, the practice is successive throughout and not restricted to a madhab, and is different from the second one in the sense that it's not just in words we're talking. We're actually talking about absolute practice, that the siwak, etc., has been used across the board like that. So that's essentially that. Some other examples of that would be لا زكاة في المال حتى يحول عليها الحول. Nobody says that as soon as you receive money you have to give zakat. They all go by a year being passed over it. That doesn't mean on every penny of it, but they categorize that in different ways. But pretty much everybody agrees that you don't pay zakat on. It's not like income tax where every bit you make over a certain amount you have to pay. It's usually you have to remain at least a person of some kind of wealth for a year, and then you pay at the end of the year, and then each subsequent year like that. That's one that everybody agrees with that. Then another one is, for example, that any buried treasure that you find that is not yours, you just find out it doesn't belong to anybody, then 1/5 has to be, so the hadith is الركاز الذي جعل الله فيه على لسان رسول الخمس وتواترت بذلك الآثار. So there's 1/5 taken from that. And another one is that cows and camels, for example, cows and camels, that's so widespread and everybody knows that is something that for qurbani or for any other religious practice, you can split that among 7 people, and 7 shares it can be divided into, as opposed to a goat or a sheep, right? And that's pretty much one of this category. Now I know some of this might have been kind of complicated, but inshallah this gives us some understanding of it. What we're going to look at right now is, now that we finished the discussion on the 4 categories of mutawatir as related by Anwar Shah Kashmiri rahimahullah and others, we're going to move on to the sunnah and then the khabar ahad, and discover what makes a khabar ahad and what are the conditions for accepting it. So we'll start with the mashhur. I've already described the mashhur. Mashhur is the well-known narration, which started off from the time of the Prophet ﷺ by lone report. So not many people reported, maybe just one person or a few more people. However, after that, in the second and third generation, it just became widespread. So that is what the mashhur would be. Okay, that is what the mashhur would be. And what is necessary here to understand is that in the second and third generation, al-qarnu thani wa thalith is where it has to become widespread. If it doesn't become widespread until after that, then it can't be called mashhur, because only those two levels, the second, third generation, is what we're going to take into consideration, right? We're going to take that into consideration. That's the second and third generation, tabi'in, tabu'ut tabi'in. That's what we're going to take into consideration, because after that, many hadith, even if they were, so from the fourth and fifth generation, many other narrations that were just single lone reports, or very few people had reported them before, they became well known as well. That's not considered anymore. So it's only the second and third that we're going to take into consideration. And what we have is that one way to understand this is that we're going to describe Sunnatul Ahad a bit more later, but the thing that turns a Sunnatul Ahad, the lone report, into a Sunnatul Mashhura, right, is the fact that it was just accepted, right? The Sahaba and the Tabi'een, and they just accepted it, right? And so that is how we say that the Salaf, the past scholars, they accepted it, so it became widespread. So that's what, if they didn't accept it and it just remained like a minority practice, or it wasn't practiced on a mass scale, then that obviously will become a khabar wahid, right? Now, so they do start off as khabar wahid in the beginning, and then they expand and become mashhur. So we're looking at this retrospectively from now. The people at that time, they would have looked at these things very differently, because it was either established or it wasn't. And if it was established, it would be sahih for them, right? But it's now, in hindsight, after all of this has been done, time has passed, we're looking at this in a historical way. So that's why all of this applies to us. Subhanallah. So essentially, it's the second, third generation, the Sahaba and Tabi'een generation, that is who has to accept it. And only that will establish it as mashhur. Otherwise, after that, it makes no difference. So that which has been established through the Sahaba and they practiced upon it, that's obviously going to be stronger than if it only gained currency in the generation afterwards. And then that's going to be stronger than if it gained generation that gained currency in the generation after that, right? So that's why if you do run into any kind of confusion where you might see a hadith called ahad by some fuqaha and then they use it, it's probably because it's become mashhur, but because of its inception they call it ahad. So sometimes you could have confusions like that, right? Just wanted to clarify that point. Now usually when it comes to the mashhur, the ruling of a mashhur, right, is that the ummah, I'll just give you a very simple definition again. The mashhur is that report which is initially like the lone report, and then it became widely known in the second and third era, to the extent that the ummah received it with acceptance and it has reached you in this manner, right? Thus it becomes like the mutawatir report. An example of this is the stoning in the case of adultery, for example. Now, the ruling in this regard, the mashhur report necessitates satisfactory knowledge. So rejecting it is heresy and innovation and sin. Whereas the mutawatir, as we said, that necessitates decisive knowledge, definitive knowledge. Rejecting that is blasphemous, apostasy, disbelief. But mashhur, because it gives you satisfaction rather than absolute conviction, so there is enough satisfaction there for us to use it. So rejecting it is slightly lower at heresy level rather than complete kufr, right? Now, in terms of practice though, anything established through mashhur and anything established through mutawatir, There's no disagreement among the scholars on the necessity of acting on both of them. Right? So they both provide enough satisfaction that it's necessary to act upon whatever. So whatever is established through that is usually going to be wajib or fard. Right? So fard is from the first one, second one is going to be wajib, or in between them. Now we move on to the al-khabr al-wahid. Now khabr al-wahid, a simple definition again, is the khabr al-wahid is that report which has been transmitted by one person from another, or by one person from a group, or by a group from one person. So it was only one sahabi and then a group took it from him. However, it's not spread in that second, third generation like the mashhur has, and the number of transmitters then is not to be given consideration as long as it does not reach the level of the mashhur report, where there's so many people in that second or third generation that take it to make it such that they would never have, it's so many people, they would never have agreed to have accepted it if there was any problem with it. Now, acting upon a khabr al-wahid, right, it now depends on what kind of khabr al-wahid it is. We're gonna look at that, because there's a procedure of when you accept a khabr al-wahid. Khabr al-wahid is not as strong, the lone report is not as strong, okay, as the mashhur and the mutawatir is. So let's just look at that a bit, and in the rest of this discussion for today. So the khabr al-wahid is as I said, I've defined it, but for khabr al-wahid to be accepted, it needs to you're going to look at the narrator in that case. Okay, so the condition for the obligation of acting on a khabr al-wahid, right, where the hukm and the ruling that it presents is seen as obligatory, fard, wajib, then it needs a few conditions. So the particular narrators, you're going to have to scrutinize all of them, right? So number one, the narrator has to be a Muslim, okay? Because if he's not a Muslim, then we couldn't trust that. I'll go into this in a bit more detail. I'll just mention them in brief here, right? The narrator has to be Muslim. The narrator has to be upright, religiously speaking, right? Not somebody who's committed sins, and not somebody who purposely commits sins. Number three, he has to be scrupulous. He has to be very particular in what he's reporting. He can't be making mistakes. If he's one known of making mistakes, sometimes even a single mistake, then it puts to doubt what he's relating, because he could be making a mistake in that case. Number four, he has to be intelligent to show that he's actually understood what's going on, right? Otherwise he hasn't misunderstood it, misrepresented it. And of course, the last one is that there has to be a continuous proper chain as well. So if narrations are of that nature, right? If the narrators are upright, scrupulous and particular, Muslim and intelligent, then there's going to be more of a chance of that narration to be accepted. Then why not accept that khabr al-wahid, or that lone report of that individual or those few individuals? Okay, so let's look at that slightly a bit more. For example, so it's important to understand that, right? I'm just wondering what else to cover in the minute that we have left. That's why I'm just wondering what else I should cover. So let me just cover that aspect, and inshallah then what we can do is in the next session we're gonna look at something a bit more. The other thing is that what we need to quickly introduce before I go into in detail in the next lesson is that the narrator will be of two types, right? One is ma'ruf and the other one is majhul. Okay, the ma'ruf and majhul, so these are two different types of narrators, right? In the sense that the first type is recognized for his knowledge and judgment. That there are people just well known that they have all of these qualities. So they were the four Khalifs, for example. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, Zayd ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu, Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu anhu, and so on. These people are known, so they've already been dealt with, they've already been accepted, so those are ma'ruf, they're well known. Then you have the others, right, who are not so well known, right? They are obscure. They're not as well known. They're not as well known for their memory and integrity. Okay, so inshallah we'll deal with this in more detail in in the next session, inshallah. To conclude this session for today, we're gonna just expound upon the qualifications of each of the rawis for when we can actually take their narration. Right? These things are obviously fully found in, for example, they're going to be fully found in any sahih narration that you take. So for a khabr al-wahid, for that to be acceptable, it has to fall under these criteria. So the first one was what we said, is that he has to be Muslim, right? And obviously the reason for that is that if it was a non-Muslim, we don't know where their affiliation lies. And if not all non-Muslims are like that, but many non-Muslims, they're enemies of Islam. So what they are saying, that something is from the Prophet ﷺ, it could be completely wrong. So obviously it may have bad intentions. So we can't accept anything as a hadith, as a lone report. So they're never accepted from any of the non-Muslims of the time. So they don't feature as rawis. They don't feature as transmitters for us. So that was the first point. Second one we'll take as, let's just look at the intelligence aspect, right? I mentioned that as number 3 last time. Intelligence, or number 4 last time. So intelligence has to be from somebody who's, this is not talking about like a very discerning child. This has to be somebody who's mature, right, adolescent, and it can't be somebody who's got mental health issues in the sense that he's got insanity, schizophrenia, or anything like that, or completely insane. They're not even actually considered to be that they are actually forgiven in many aspects. So we can't take their news because they can't be trusted. The other one is scrupulousness. You have to be very careful, and they have to be very particular in what they have said, right? And that means that they should not have. That they should be able to remember what they heard or what they saw from the time that they heard it or saw it, right, to when they report it. So if they have any lapses in between, then that means their scrupulousness, their dabt in Arabic, as it's called, is damaged. So they can't have that. So that's that. The next one is adala, right, which means he has to be upright, worthy of giving testimony in court. So not under suspicion, or not guilty of major sins, or not guilty of lying, right? Not guilty of falsehood. So that's why, because it's all about making sure that the knowledge we're getting is the absolute truth. You can't have somebody who is not upright, who is not trustworthy and righteous in that regard, who falls prey to their whims and desires. So it's likely that they may make up stuff. So that's why it has to be a Muslim. He has to be upright, religious. He has to be scrupulous and refined in what they and have complete, accurate memory, and then has to be intelligent, right? So those are what are required for any hadith to be, even considered. To be honest, if there's weakness in these, then it's going to make the hadith weak and so on. Here we're just looking at this, with a focus on the khabr al-wahid, and there's a bit more discussion that we'll do inshallah in the next session. Regarding that, I'll highlight more about the well-known narrators and the not so well-known narrators, and exactly what hukum you can take from them, what kind of effect that creates in fiqh for us. Inshallah, we'll see you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.